Hi everyone, and welcome to Learn Extra Maths Literacy Session 4. In this session we are going to look at the introduction of financial maths. Specifically, we will look at simple interest, compound interest, and compound decrease, or as we often refer to it, compound depreciation. But before we get there, let's just look and discuss interest. Interest is paid on money that is either borrowed or invested. Specifically, if you invest money, then you will get paid interest. However, if you go to any type of financial institution, to a bank, and you borrow money, then the cost to you is the interest that you will have to pay back on the borrowed amount. And very, very important, everyone, we always, whenever we use interest rates in the following financial equations that we will do, we always express them as a percentage. Remember, a percentage is always written as something over 100. There are two different ways in which interest is calculated: simple interest and compound interest. We are going to look at each of those in turn. So first, let's start with simple interest. Now, simple interest is calculated on the initial or principal amount, or if you like, the original amount of money that is either borrowed or invested. The thing with simple interest is that the amount of interest that you will get each period will always be the same. That's important to remember. And generally, although we don't make a lot of use of simple interest in real life situations, generally they are used in hire purchase agreements. A hire purchase agreement is a type of agreement where you buy something on credit, for example, and you agree to make a certain deposit, and then you pay off that credit, whatever amount it is, by fixed monthly payments. So that is what a hire purchase agreement is. It's often used when you buy furniture or equipment. It can be used then. The formula that we use when we work with simple interest is A is equal to P times 1 plus I times N. Okay, so let's look at each of these terms in turn, and I will discuss each of them. A represents the final amount. So whatever final amount we are trying to work out, or the future value, that is what A represents in this formula. P represents the principal amount or the initial amount, or as I said before, the original amount that we are working with. I is your interest rate. And very important, as I said before, your interest rate must always be in decimal form or percentage form, or in decimal form or simplified percentage form. Okay, so we always write it as a fraction over 100, and N is the number of years in the case of simple interest. So the period of your investment or your credit agreement, or whatever the case is. Okay, and guys, you have to be able to work out each of these variables. So you need to know how to work out the value of A, P, I, and N, depending on the type of questions you're given. So let's look at those questions now. This is example 1. We are asked to find the simple interest earned on 6,000 Rand invested for 3 years at 12% per annum. So there's some key terms here. Let's look at each of them in turn. Simple interest, you need to be very careful here. So they're not asking you to work out the final amount. They just want to know how much of interest are you earning. Okay, so be careful. They don't want to know the value of A. That's not what they're asking you for. Although in order to work out your interest, you will need to find the value of A. What they would really like to know is what is the interest earned on this amount of 6,000 Rand. So earned on 6,000 Rand, that means that that is the value you are starting with. So that's the value of P. it is invested for 3 years. So 3 years will be your period. So that's the value of N. At 12% per annum. This is your interest rate, but remember we need to write this in a decimal or percentage form as a fraction over 100. So I can write it as 12 over 100 or 0,12. And the PA here, PA means per annum. So in other words, the interest is calculated per year, yearly. Okay, so that's the meaning of PA. So the formula that we will use for simple interest is A is equal to P times 1 plus I times N. Now, I've already informally made little letters on each of what each of these variables represent, their numerical values, but let's do it again. We have P, which is our initial amount, has a value of 6,000. I, which is the interest rate, is 0.12 in decimal form. And N, which is the number of years, is 3. Okay, so it is always quite useful to just write down your given information. We need to work out A, but that is not what the question wants to know. The question actually is asking you to work out the interest. So this is really what we are aiming for, the interest. So the question is not done when we find the value of A. All right, but let's first find the value of A to help us to get to the interest. We know that P, the principal amount, is 6,000. So we can substitute that in, times 1 plus I, your interest rate, 0.12 in decimal form. And we know that N, which is our number of years, is 3. So we can put that all in there. And now it's just simply a matter of doing this entire calculation on your calculator. Once you've got the basics up there and substitute it into your formula, you will get marks for putting these variables in the correct place. So make sure you show you're working. Okay. So let's put this into our calculator. We've got 6,000 times 1 plus 0.12 times 3. Close our brackets. And we get 8,160 Rand. Okay, but remember we are not done because the question wants us to find the interest. How do we calculate the interest? Now, the final amount, 8,160, that final amount is made up of the principal amount or the initial value plus all the interest that was earned over this period of 3 years. Okay, so your final amount is equal to your initial amount plus all of the interest that you get. So we know that the final amount is 8,160. We know that the principal amount, the amount we invested, was 6,000 Rand. So if we want to work out the amount of interest here, all I have to do is from the final amount, I need to subtract the original amount. So therefore, the interest will be equal to 8,160 minus 6,000. And this will give us an answer of 2,160 Rand. And this is the simple interest that is earned. So we have in fact answered the question. They want to know what is the interest earned on 6,000 Rand over 3 years at 12% per annum. And in fact, it was 2,160 Rand. And guys, remember, when you get to the end of this, please put in your units. You need to have your rands there in order to get full marks here. So don't leave out your R. All right. Now, the next example still deals with simple interest. But in this one, they ask us, how much would you have to invest? How much? So what amount of money will you have to invest now? So what are they looking for? Straight away there, that tells you that they are looking for how much you would have to invest. They are looking for P. That is what we are looking for. All right. At 7.5% per annum, remember that means per year, simple interest. So that straight away tells you that we are going to use the formula A is equal to P times 1 plus I times N. In order to get a value of 12,000 Rand after 2 years. Now, this is not so straightforward because we are looking for P, but we've got a formula that gives us the value for A. So guys, in order to get to the value of P, we are going to have to change the subject of the formula. Okay, so change the subject of the formula. What that means is that we need to solve for P. The way to do that is to divide both sides of this equation by 1, this bracket, 1 plus I times n. So if I divide both sides of this equation by 1 plus I times n, I will just get P. So if you are given this in an exam and you're given the original formula here, and if you're expected to find the value of P by changing the subject of the formula, you will obviously get marks for doing it correctly, dividing both sides by 1 plus I times n. Okay, so the first step was to actually get it in the form where we can find a value for P. All right, let's now look at what they gave us. Let's write down the given information. So we already established that we are looking for P. They tell us that the interest rate is 7.5% per annum. So I is 7.5%, but we want that in decimal form. So it's 7,5 over 100, which is 0,075. All right. We are going to get in the future a final amount after 2 years of 12,000 Rand. So A, which is the final amount, is 12,000. After 2 years, therefore n would have to be 2. Okay, so now we've got all of the variables except for the P, so obviously that means we need to solve for P. So I substitute the values that I have into this equation and let's see what we get. So we know that A has a value of 12,000 all over 1 plus I. You will get marks for the correct substitution, so make sure that you don't make any careless mistakes here. Okay, so don't put in too many zeros or anything funny like that. Times n, which is 2. Close our brackets. This is just a matter of now substituting into our calculator. All right. So we will get, we can use our fraction button here, 12,000 over, open your brackets, 1 plus 0.075 times 2. And that will give us an answer of 10,434 Rand. Because we are dealing with rands, obviously we work with rands and cents, so I would need to round this off to 2 decimal places. So I will get 78 cents. So it's 10,434 Rand and 78 cents, correct to the nearest cent. So guys, in these first 2 examples on simple interest, we worked from 2 different perspectives. First, we found the interest, so we worked out the total simple interest earned on an investment. And in this example, we have worked out the initial or the principal amount. So you need to practice working on these different types of questions so that you get familiar with how to negotiate around that simple interest formula. Now, the next type of interest we are going to look at is compound interest. Compound interest is really the type of interest that most financial institutions use in everyday life. So this is the more common one. Compound interest is calculated on the principal or the initial value and any accumulated interest. So it's based on whatever original amount you have plus all the interest that has added up until that point. So therefore, it is often referred to as interest on interest. Also, because compound interest is based on the accumulated amounts at the end of each period, you will find that it will change from period to period. So unlike simple interest that will stay the same every period, compound interest will change from period to period. And it is often calculated more than once a year, but that's a concept we will deal with in later sections, not in this one. The formula that we use for compound interest is A is equal to P times 1 plus I to the power of N. Okay, and that's where the big difference is between this formula and the simple interest formula. Okay, let's look at each of these variables in turn. A still represents the same thing. It is your final amount or your future value, an amount sometime in the future. Your P is your initial or your principal amount. I is your interest rates. And remember, it is always written in decimal form, or you can write it as a fraction over 100, but I prefer to write it in decimal form. Except for sometimes you would need to leave it in fraction form depending on the question, but generally we write it in decimal form. N is the period or the number of years or number of months, as we will see later on. Okay, so we are going to use this formula, A is equal to P times 1 plus I to the N, whenever we deal with any compound interest questions. So let's look at some of the examples where we will be using that formula. Okay, this is example 3. You are told that you invest 10,000 Rand for 3 years at 12% per annum compound interest. So in that line, we have a whole lot of information. Okay, so let's write down the information that we have. We invest 10,000 Rand, so that's the original amount we put in. Therefore, P is 10,000. We invested for 3 years, so therefore N is 3. And it's at 12% per annum compound interest. So remember again, PA, that means per annum per year. Okay, so our I in decimal form will be 0.12 because that's 12 over 100. We are told that it's compound interest, which means we will have to use the formula A is equal to P times 1 plus I to the power of N. They want to know what the investment will be worth. How much will you get at the end of the 3-year period? All right, so we've got all of the variables that we need so that we can plug it into this formula and work it out. Okay, so A is what we are looking for. We know that P has a value of 10,000. So we can put that in times 1 plus I, which we know has a value of 0.12, or you can write it as 12 over 100. You will get the same answer. To the power of N, and we know that N has a value of 3. Okay guys, so once you get to this step, once you've substituted correctly, all you really need to do is to plug this into your calculator, and let's see what we get. Okay, so it's 10,000 times 1 plus 0.12 raised to the power, so we use the power button, of 3. And we get an answer of 14,049 Rand and 28 cents. So it's really nice here. We don't have to do any rounding off. It's already rounded off for us there to the nearest cent. So it's 14,049 Rand and 28 cents. Okay, so you invest 10,000 Rand at an interest rate of 12% compound interest, and you're going to get 14,049 Rand. Now, that was a question where we had to find the final amount, but in the next part, the B part of this, they want us to find the value of P. Okay, so let's look at that one. We want to know how much, so what amount, what initial amount, that's what we're looking for. What initial amount will we have to invest at 6% per annum, so there's our interest rate, for 5 years in order to get a final amount of 10,000 Rand. Okay, so let's have a look at what variables we are given. We are looking for the value of P. That's what we need to work out. It's invested at 6% per annum, so I, we can write as 0,06 since it's 6 over 100. For 5 years, n is equal to 5, and we get a final amount of 10,000. So A is 10,000. Okay, now this is a compound interest question where we have to work out the initial value of P. So we will usually be given the formula A is equal to P times 1 plus I all to the power of n. You will be given that, and sometimes you might even be given the formula in the form where P is the subject of the formula. But because we weren't given that, we are going to once again have to change the subject of the formula. We have to change the subject of the formula and make P the subject of the formula. That's the aim, because we are looking for P. So it's very simple. In order to get to P here, I would need to divide both sides by the bracket 1 plus I to the power of n. So therefore I will get P is equal to A, our final amount, all over 1 plus I to the power of n. So once I've got it in this form, where P is the subject of the formula, it's really just a matter of now substituting our values into the formula and working out the value of P. So A has a value of 10,000. We can put that in, all over 1 plus I. Your interest rate here was 0,06. And n, which is your number of years, is 5. So we can put that in. Okay, we can then put all of this into our calculator and work out the value for P. So using your fraction button, we're going to have 10,000 over, and remember to use brackets, otherwise you will get funny errors. Close your bracket to the power of 5, and this will give us an answer of 7,472 Rand. To the nearest cent, it will be 58 cents. Okay, so our answer here, 7,472.58 to the nearest cent. And once again, very important to remember your units. Since it was given to you in rands, you need to give the answer back to us in rands as well. So guys, when it comes to compound interest and finding the value of A and finding the value of P, it really is just a matter of practice, and you should be able to manage any type of question based on compound interest. The next section we are going to look at is compound decrease or depreciation. Now, depreciation really describes what happens when an asset or an investment loses its value. So for example, if you buy a brand new car and you drive it out of the showroom, in the time it takes you to drive from the showroom to your house, that car has already depreciated. So if you paid 100,000 Rand for that car, by the time you get home, it's going to be already worth less than 100,000 Rand because of depreciation. Okay, and there's all sorts of assets that depreciate. So for example, cars, we looked at equipment, furniture, anything like that will depreciate or lose value over time. Even certain investments can depreciate over time. The formula we use is very, very similar to the compound increase formula, except for, importantly, we have a minus sign in this bracket. Because we are losing value, we are depreciating something, we have a negative in this bracket and not a positive sign as we do with compound increase. So very, very important to use your minus sign when you take into account depreciation. Okay, so let's look at each of these terms in turn and look at their meaning. A is the final amount or the end value. P is your initial or the original amount. N is the number of years or the period. And in this case, because we're actually looking at depreciation, the I, while it's still an interest rate, is in fact the depreciation rate. And just as we did with the other interest rates, you can write it in decimal form, or you can write it as a fraction over 100. So we're going to now use this formula that we've just learned on compound decrease, and we're going to use it to do example 4. We are told that a new sound system costs 12,500 Rand. Cost, so that's how much you buy it for. If the value of the sound system depreciates, remember, means loses value. Okay, so it starts at 12,500 Rand, but it loses value at a rate of 15% per annum, so that's a yearly rate. We want to know how much will you be able to sell it for at the end of 4 years. So at the end of 4 years, you decide, okay, I want to get rid of the sound system, I want to buy a new one. How much are you going to be able to sell it for? Okay, it costs 12,500 Rand. So they tell you what the initial value of this sound system is. So we put that in. It depreciates at a rate of 15% per annum. So the value of I is 15 over 100, or 0.15. How much will you be able to sell it for? So we're looking for the value of A. We want to know what the final amount will be at the end of 4 years. So N has a value of 4. So the formula we are using here, because we are dealing with obviously a depreciation question, is A is equal to P times 1 minus, very important, times 1 minus I to the power of N. Okay, so let's have a look at that. We can plug in the values into our formula. We have P with 12,500 times 1 minus I, which we know is 0.15. And that's raised to the power of 4. Okay, so guys, what you will notice when we get an answer here, and it needs to make sense to you, because obviously if something is depreciating, it's going to have a lower value than the one you started with. So when you get your answer, just think about it for a second, and obviously if it's not lower than the value you started with, then you've made a mistake and you need to go back and check or redo. Okay, so you know that your answer, your A, has to be less than your initial amount because we are dealing with depreciation. So it's 12,500 times 1 minus 0.15 to the power of 4. That gives us an answer of 6,525 Rand and 8 cents to the nearest cent. So it would be 6,525, 8 cents. So you can see it makes sense. Your final value, your A, is less than your initial value P. It makes sense. This sound system has in fact depreciated. So it's depreciated from 12,500 Rand all the way to 6,525 Rand over a period of 4 years using a depreciation rate of 15% per annum. Okay, now the next one, example 5, is also going to be using this formula for depreciation, but in this case, we are going to be looking for the value of P. So let's have a look at this one. So this is example 5. You have just bought a new car, they tell you, and the salesman tells you that the car will be worth 60,000 Rand after 10 years. So these are some of the key points that we are going to use later on, at a depreciation rate of 7% per annum. So let's just look at what's been told to us thus far. You've bought a car, but in 10 years' time, the end value at that point of the car will be 60,000 Rand. So it starts at some higher amount now, so we're sort of working backwards. It depreciates to a value of 60,000 Rand after 10 years, and they give you the depreciation rate. So at the end of 10 years, your car is obviously going to be worth less than what you bought it for. Okay, let's look at what the question wants. They want to know how much does the car cost now? Okay, now being presently, what is the current or original value of the car? And they tell you to use the formula P is equal to A all over 1 minus I to the power of N. So basically what we've done here is they've taken the formula where if you wanted to work out depreciation, it's A is equal to P times 1 minus I to the power of N, and they've changed the subject of the formula and found the value for P. So they've given you the formula to use. All right, we need to find the value of P. We want to know how much does the car cost now. We are given that the end amount or the final amount of the car in 10 years' time will be 60,000. We are also told that the interest rate, the depreciation rate, will be 7% per annum. So that's 7 over 100, which is 0.07. And N is 10 years. And it is P that we are looking for. Okay, so since they have written out the formula for us, all we have to do now is simply substitute the values in. So A is 60,000 all over 1 minus I, your depreciation rate is 0.07 to the power of N, and we know that N has a value of 10. Okay, let's just put that into our calculator. So we will get 60,000 over, use your brackets here so that you don't get lots of errors, 1 minus 0.07 to the power of 10, and that will give us an answer of 123,971 Rand. To the nearest cent, it would be 47 cents. So this car, when you buy it 10 years previously, it was actually valued at 123,971 Rand and 47 cents. So guys, what you'll see here is that depreciation has quite an effect on the value of any type of asset. In this case, we looked at a car, because a car that's worth 123,000, which seems like quite a lot of money right now, in 10 years' time, that very same car is only going to be worth 60,000 Rand if you use a depreciation rate of 7%. So when accountants often use this, it plays a big part in businesses and the amount of profits and so on that they make. But it's not something that we have to worry about. But it's very interesting that a car that was worth 123 is going to be worth 60,000 Rand just because of depreciation working on that car. Okay guys, so we're going to look at the very last example on compound decrease. This question is phrased a little bit differently, so be a little bit careful here. We are told that a very rich woman wins the lottery and she decides to give all the money she has won away. Well, obviously she would have to be very rich if she wants to give that money away. In the first week, she gives away 25% of the prize money. Now, straight away, that should sort of ring alarm bells in your head, and you should think, well, if she's giving the money away, that means the amount of money is decreasing, so it's losing value. So this question has something to do with depreciation. She gives away 25% in the second week, and then she gives away 25% in the third week, and so on and so on. If she then has 100 Rand of the prize money left, so that would be the end value, that's what she ends up with, after 33 weeks, how much did she win? Okay, and they want it to the nearest Rand, and they tell us we are going to be using the depreciation formula. Okay, so first, let's just write down some key information that we are given in the question. They want to know how much she's going to win, or how much she did win, so that means we are looking for the value of P. We don't know how much she won, but what we do know is at the end, she ended up with 100 Rand. So A is 100. That's the final amount she gets after she gives away all of this money. Now your depreciation rate here is the fact that she's giving away 25% all the time. That fact tells you what the depreciation rate is. So while the depreciation rate is not given to you explicitly, you can sort of decipher it out of the question. Because she's giving it away at a rate of 25% every week, your depreciation rate is 25%, 25 over 100, which is 0.25. All right? And so far we have only worked with years, but now they tell us that this has happened after a total of 33 weeks. So N in this case is in weeks, 33 weeks. Okay, our interest rate, incidentally, is also in weeks because remember, she's giving away 25% of this money every week. And guys, that's very important. The interest rate, or in this case, the depreciation rate, needs to correspond with the number of periods, or in this case, the number of weeks. So because the interest rate is in weeks and our period is also in weeks, we can carry on and use this formula as we normally would. We are looking for the value of P. Now, they haven't told you how to find the value of P, so you need to rearrange this formula. Remember, changing the subject of the formula just means rearrange it and look for the value of P. So if I want to get to P, I need to divide both sides by 1 minus I to the power of N. And I will get that P is equal to A all over 1 minus I to the power of N. Okay, we know that A has a value of 100 Rand after 33 weeks. The interest rate, the depreciation rate rather, is 25%. And we know that the time period over which this happens is 33 weeks. And as I said, because your interest rate and your time period are both in weeks, we can continue with the formula. There's no conflicting information here. We can call up our calculator, plug it in, and let's see what we get. So it's 100 all over 1 minus 0.25. Close your brackets, raise that to the power of 33. And that gives us this huge answer of 1.3 million. So she won the lottery with a value of 1,327,328 Rand. And the reason I'm rounding off there, because you need to be careful, the question said to the nearest Rand. So I'm not going to put any cents in here. Okay, so she started with a value of 1.3 million Rand. And at the end of 33 weeks, after she's decided to give away each week 25% of this 1.3 million, and then the next week she gives away 25% of what's left, and so on and so on and so on, eventually at the end of 33 weeks, she ends up with an amount of 100 Rand. Okay, so obviously this was a very rich lady, because if I won 1 million Rand, I would not be giving it away. Okay, and that's it for our compound decrease section. The next thing we will look at is the exercises. Exercise 1. Calculate the present value of a sum of money that amounts to 1,000 Rand in 5 years' time if the simple interest is 5% per annum and you are given the formula P is equal to A divided by 1 plus I times N. Okay guys, now you've had some time to look at this for yourself. Let's see if you got the right answer. In this exercise, we are asked to calculate the present value, present meaning right now the original or the initial value of a sum of money that amounts to 1,000 Rand in 5 years' time. So it amounts to 1,000 Rand in 5 years' time. The end amount or the final amount is 1,000 Rand. The period that we are looking at is 5 years. And they tell us that the simple interest is 5% per annum. So interest is added at a rate of 5% every year. They have given us the formula, P is equal to A over 1 plus I times N. That is simply a manipulation of the formula. A is equal to P times 1 plus I times N. So it's just a manipulation of your simple interest formula, and we've now got P as the subject of the formula. All right, so we've got the value of A. We know what N is, and we know what the interest rate is. Remember, whenever you put your interest rate into your formula, it needs to either be as a fractional form or as a decimal form. So 5 over 100 is 0,05. That's what we can put in. We know that the value of A is 1,000, and that's all over 1 plus I, which is 0,05, times N, which is 5 years. Okay, we can then put all of this into the calculator and let's see what we get. So we call up the fraction button. It's 1,000 over 1 plus 0,05 times 5. Close the bracket, and we get an answer of 800 Rand. Very important, remember to put in your units. It was given to you with rands, so your answer needs to be in rands. So what this basically means is that an amount of 800 Rand is needed right now in order for it to amount to 1,000 Rand in 5 years' time if we are using simple interest and we are looking at a rate of 5% per annum. Exercise 2. 5,000 Rand was invested at 5,2% per annum simple interest. Find the number of years and days it took to accumulate to double its present value. Use the formula N is equal to A minus P, all divided by I times P. Okay, so you've had some time to look at this exercise too. Let's see if you got the following. They tell us that 5,000 Rand was invested at 5.2% per annum simple interest. So simple interest means that they used the formula A is equal to P times 1 plus I times N to work out what final amount we will get. 5,000 Rand was invested, so 5,000 Rand is your initial value, that is the value of P. It's invested at a rate of 5.2% per annum. Per annum means every year, so every year we have a rate 5.2%. Remember, whenever you put your interest rate into the formula, it needs to be as a fraction or in decimal form. We want to find the number of years and days it will take to accumulate. That means accumulate means just amount to in the end. What will the final value be? Or in the end it doubles its present value. And we want to find out the number of years and days that it took to accumulate to double its present value. Now guys, when we talk about doubling, we mean 2 times as much. So if the present value is now 5,000 Rand, if it were to double it in value, the final amount will be 5,000 times 2. So that means the 5,000 Rand has doubled in value to become 10,000. Okay, and we need to find the number of years and days. Now, because they're looking for the number of years and days, you need to remember, we're going to use this later. There are 365 days in a year. We're not talking about leap years here. And they've given us the formula that we can use to work out the value of n. This formula is basically just a manipulation of the simple interest formula. All right, so let's see what we've got. We know that the formula is given, so we basically need to just substitute our values in. The final value is twice as much as the original value, so the final value would be 10,000 since the original amount that is invested is 5,000 Rand. We divide that by the interest rate, which is in decimal form 0.052, times by the initial amount, which is 5,000 Rand. And let's see what we get. So this is just a matter of substituting into the formula, putting it into your calculator, and then working out your answer. So we've got, let's call up our fraction button, 10,000 Rand minus 5,000 divided by 0.052 times 5,000. And that gives us an answer of 19,2307 and so on. So we've got 19,2307 and it goes on and on and on. We wanted this answer to be in years and days. So we know that 19, the whole number part, will be the number of years that this amount takes, this 5,000 Rand takes to double to 10,000 Rand. So it takes 19 years, but we still need to find out how many days it will take as well. Okay, so what we have to do here is remember there are 365 days in a year. Okay, and we are looking at the fractional part or the decimal part of this answer. So that is the fractional amount of days that we are interested in. So all we really do, we call up the calculator again. We've got 19,23076923. That portion there, the 0.23 and so on, that is the fractional number of days that we are interested in. So if I subtract 19 from that, this is the portion I'm interested in. That's the fractional number of days that I need for this question. So I need to times that by 365. That will then give me an answer of 84,23, so on and so on and so on. But we're only interested in the whole number portion. So therefore, it will take 19 years and 84 days for a present value of 5,000 Rand to give you 10,000 Rand if we are using an interest rate of 5.2% per annum and we are using simple interest. So just to go over again how we got the 84 days, all we did is we took the decimal part of this, the answer. So we took the one behind the decimal comma, we times that by the number of days in a year. So we basically found that fractional number of days, and that times 365 gave us 84 days. So therefore it will take 19 years and 84 days in order for this investment to happen. So I hope that you got that answer. It is a little bit tricky to work out the number of days there, but just practice it a little bit and I'm sure you will get it. Exercise 3. You invest 10,000 Rand in a bank for 5 years. How much will you get at the end of the 5th year if interest is calculated at 35% per annum simple interest, and if interest is calculated at 23% per annum compound interest? Alright guys, so you had some time now to do exercise 3. Let's see how you got along with that one. You are told that you invest 10,000 Rand in a bank for 5 years. You invest 10,000 Rand. That's the original amount that you are working with. So this is the value of P. It is invested for 5 years, so that will be our value of N. We want to know how much we will get at the end of the 5th year, and then we have two different scenarios. In the first one, interest is calculated at 35% per annum, simple interest. Okay, simple interest straight away, that should tell you the formula you're going to be using is A is equal to P times 1 plus I times N. We are looking for how much we are going to get at the end, so that means we are looking for the final amount. We know that P has a value of 10,000. We know that I is 35%, which we can write as 0,35. And N is equal to 5. So in the first case, we're investing this money at 35%, but here we're working with simple interest. So we plug this into our formula. P has a value of 10,000 times 1 plus our interest rate, which is 0,35, times N, which is 5. We can then put that into our calculator. So we will get 10,000 times 1 plus 0.35 times 5. And that will give us an answer of 27,500 Rand. Okay, so if you're looking at a simple interest rate of 35%, you've got an amount of 10,000, you're going to end up with 27,500 Rand over 5 years. Now let's see what happens if we take that very same amount, that very same 10,000 Rand, we still put it into our investment for 5 years. But in this case, interest is calculated at 23% per annum compound interest. So there's the big difference. That means the formula we are using is A is equal to P times 1 plus I to the power of N. We are still looking for the final value, and our interest rate here, 23%, which is 23 over 100, which we can write as 0,23. We can then plug in these values into our formula, so we get 10,000 times 1 plus 0.23 to the power of 5. Let's call up a calculator. So that's 10,000 times 1 plus 0.23 to the power of 5. And we get 28,153 Rand and 6 cents to the nearest cent. So it's 28,153,06. Now what you'll notice, guys, look at this amount, the answer you get when you invest at 23% compound interest, and the answer you get when you invest at 35% simple interest. You'll notice that the amount in simple interest is less than the amount that you got when you invested it at compound interest. So you cannot always assume that just because you are being offered a higher interest rate, that will automatically mean you get a higher amount at the end. Okay, it also depends on the number of compoundings and also if you are using compound interest or simple interest. So you will see that generally you will get a better deal if you invest at a compound interest rate. This is exercise 4. Jabu is starting a business. He plans to invest his money with a bank for 8 years at an interest rate of 12% compounded annually. If he would like his investment to be worth 90,000 Rand at the end of 8 years, how much should he invest now? Use the formula P is equal to A divided by 1 plus I to the power of N. Okay everyone, so now you've had time to work out exercise 5. Let's see if you get the same answer that I did. We've got the fact that Jabu's starting a business, that's what they tell us. He plans to invest his money. Invest means he's going to deposit it and allow interest to grow on that money. He invested with a bank for 8 years at an interest rate of 12% compounded annually. Now, what that basically means, 12% compounded annually, it just means that the interest is being added once a year at a rate of 12%. He wants his investment to be worth 90,000 Rand. So at the end value of the investment at the end of 8 years must be 90,000 Rand. So A is going to be 90,000 Rand. We want to know how much must he invest now. So we want to work out the value of P, and they have given us the formula. All right, so they have also given us the value for N, which is 8 years. They have told us that the interest rate is 12% compounded annually. So we can write that as 0,12. And we are looking for P. Okay, so they were really nice to you. They gave you the formula you can use. It really is just a manipulation of your standard compound interest formula. So all we need to do is plug in the values that we have. We know that A is 90,000 all over 1 plus I, which is 0,12. And N is 8. So once we've put everything into the formula, it's just a matter now of substituting this into our calculator and then seeing what we get. So we use the fraction button. It's 90,000 divided by 1 plus 0.12 to the power of 8. And that will give us an answer of 36,349 Rand and 49 cents to the nearest cent. So it is 36,349 Rand and 49 cents. And because they haven't told us exactly how we should round off, we have rounded off to the nearest cent. So what this really means at the end of the day is that if he were to deposit 36,349 Rand right now, at an interest rate of 12% per annum, he will, at the end of 8 years, manage to grow this investment to the value that he wants, which is 90,000 Rand, and then he will be able to start his business with that money. Exercise 5. You buy a car worth 95,000 Rand. How much will your car be worth after 5 years at a depreciation rate of 10% per annum? Use the formula A is equal to P times 1 minus I all to the power of N. Okay everyone, so now this is a question, exercise 5, that is based on depreciation. Let's see if you manage to work it out. You are told that you have bought a car that is worth 95,000 Rand. We want to know how much your car will be worth after 5 years. So in other words, we want to work out the end value of the car. And they tell us the depreciation rate. Remember, depreciation means it is losing value at a rate of 10% per annum. And they give us the formula that we should use. So if the car is worth currently 95,000 Rand, that is the initial value of the car. We know that we are given the interest rate is 10%, which is 0,1 in decimal form. And it takes 5 years for this car to depreciate to a certain value, which we are now going to work out. So they have very nicely given us the formula, so it's just a matter of putting the values in. P has a value of 95,000, and we know that the interest rate is 10%, and this is over a period of 5 years. So once we have everything substituted, make sure you put everything into your substitution correctly, because you don't want to lose marks for careless errors. We can then put all of this into our calculator. So it's 95,000 times 1 minus 0.1, all to the power of 5. And that will give us an answer of 56,096 Rand. It's 56,096, 0.55. To the nearest cent, we will get, let's just show you again. So we round this off to the, well, it's really nice, this one, because we don't have to round off at all, but we round it up to the nearest cent and we get 55 cents. Okay, so over a period of 5 years, if you buy a car now that's worth 95,000 Rand, but if it continually depreciates at 10%, at the end of 5 years, it's only going to be worth 56,000 Rand. So once again, you can see the effect of depreciation, where it really just lessens the value of whatever asset that you have. Guys, I hope that you managed to get all of the right answers for that exercise and really understand the concepts that were taught to you in this section, because it is a very important part of financial maths and it will come up again when we do more financial maths later on. So you need all of the basics that you learned right now in order to be able to do later financial maths questions.